Let me show you what's happening. Biden vows to take on GOP governors over schools. Yeah, he didn't just say that. He says, get them out of the way. Right now, local school officials are trying to keep children safe in a pandemic while the governor picks a fight with them and even threatens their salaries or their jobs. Talk about bullying in schools, Biden said in remarks to the White House. If they'll not help, if these governors won't help us beat the pandemic, I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way. I think there's like a 9th and a 10th Amendment about that one that you can't do that, Joe Biden.
I think it was a few weeks ago. The Biden administration said that they were going to fund the schools that get defunded over mask mandates. So DeSantis was saying we're going to defund these schools because you're requiring masks. That's no good. And then I think the Biden administration said that they were going to work to fund those schools, whatever was defunded.
Governor Kristi Noem said, South Dakota will stand up to defend freedom. Joe Biden, see you in court. All Joe Biden did with these decrees was it was a shot across the bow to red states, forcing them to assert their positions in defiance of the federal government. These mandates, these threats, getting them out of the way, all of that stuff, it's absurd. It's not going to happen. The feds are not going to be able to go into Texas and start going business to business, knocking on doors and trying to figure things out. Now, there's taxes. That's where they might get you with the IRS.
And the currency, that's all it comes down to at the end of the day. They don't have the manpower, really, and they wouldn't be able to logistically go to every single business and every door. But what they can do is click a few buttons on the computer and lock all your bank accounts. I think that's what it pretty much comes down to. We're pretty much controlled by the U.S. dollar. At the end of the day, that's where they have all that power and all that control over us because they can click 2-3 buttons, shut everything down.
Do you militant think, fascism.
Yeah.
Do you think that people in Texas, South Dakota are going to be like, oh, no, I guess I have to comply with Joe Biden? You got Wyoming and West Virginia, the deepest Trump-supporting states in the country. You think these places are going to be like, oh, geez, I guess I have to comply? Or do you think they're going to be like, screw you?
Yeah, they're going to say screw you, and then their bank accounts are going to get frozen.
And then there'll be like a state issue with the governor or whatever is going to be like to the local banks that are only in these certain areas, undo it. You can't do that.
Yeah,
governors will intervene.
And then the federal government will probably try to hit those banks and shut those local banks down. You know what I mean? Like, there's always that, like, who's got the bigger, hammer when it comes to that situation? Who's got more control over the powers of control?
The businesses will switch to crypto.
Yeah, Florida will spin up their own crypto, and then the federal government will make that crypto illegal, probably a felony, and then they'll withhold tax money to the state. And then you might see other states join in, and you could see maybe not civil war, but intense civil conflict.
Dude, we're in a civil war.
Political conflict.
No. We're in a civil war.
You got to define war, but I mean fifth generational. It seems like
right.
This is a fifth generational civil war. This
Absolutely.
is a mental
fourth
civil
and
war.
Are you familiar with fourth and fifth generational warfare?
I guess explain it to me. I'm familiar, but
we'll start with. I assume first generational warfare is like two people punching each other in the face and like charging at each other. But in order to gain control of resources or influence over a city or a region or other group of people, you can't convince them. It goes into kinetic conflict, right? Physical confrontation. There's been multiple generations. There's been espionage. There's been cyber warfare. We are moving into the era now beyond all that, which is fourth and fifth generational warfare. Fourth generational warfare is when it's not necessarily nation states anymore. It's people flying different banners within states and between states, insurgent groups like the Taliban, groups like Al-Qaeda, and groups like Antifa. Fifth generational warfare is more in winning control of resources by controlling people's minds through propaganda and information. So in that regard, no doubt, the culture war, they call it, right? It's been called a cold civil war over and over again. The problem I have with that phrase cold is that, I don't know, there was a dude in Portland who took 2 bullets to the chest by a guy who was stalking him and had a communist tattoo on his neck.
Seems hot.
Yeah, you've got...
Well, it's limited. Those are you'll see limited pockets of violence in like even the Civil War. I mean, there was Korea, or not the Civil War, rather the Cold War with Russia. We had Korea, which was a Russian-American conflict, but in the proxy of a guy getting hit on the street.
But that's like communist factions supported by a larger state versus free enterprise factions supported by another state. That wasn't the U.S. engaging in direct conflict.
Yeah, indirect.
That's why they call it the Cold War. It was a war, but it was proxy. No, what we're seeing in the United States isn't cold civil war. When you have people fighting in the streets, and there was a shootout last weekend, and there was a shootout the weekend before that, and like, How about 100 days of violent rioting in Portland with fire bombs? And then when Donald Trump is like, we're going to send some feds together, they're like, oh, fascist. Like, dude, you're firebombing buildings. And then you had the Oregon governor, I think it was the AG, sue the federal government over their attempts to enforce the law. Now you get the Democrats in the federal government. They're going nuts. And now it's the so here's what I said. When the blue state was suing, Donald Trump, the federal government, over trying to enforce the law and stop the fire bombings, the riots, I was like, this is it. People live in, they view history through condensed lenses, where you open a book and you read about the Civil War and it's like, on this day this happened, on this day this happened, on this day this happened, and you're like, wow, and you're reading it all really fast, not realizing for the people living it, it was years. I think 5 years. The Revolutionary War was 20 years. There were people who were born after the first conflict in the American Revolution and rebel sentiment, and then fought in the war for 2 years. They were born into it. This stuff went on for a really, really, really long time.
I also feel like the transfer of information back then definitely took a lot longer than nowadays.
Right, and that's why it's accelerated now. I mean, you wanted to draft a letter. Takes a month to have these meetings where they finally agree on the letter. Then it takes 3 months to get to the crown. Then the king finally gets a chance to go through the letter, reads it, crafts a response with his advisors, and goes to Parliament. Takes a month. 3 months later, it comes back to the states, and then doesn't even go to every single state.
Yeah.
So that could have taken a year just to have one message. Now it's all different. But here's what happens. Oregon sues the federal government. I said, this is it. I mean, the state is rejecting federal authority to enforce the law on federal property in their state. This is where it begins. Now, Joe Biden is trying to enforce federal decree on red states, and they're going to be doing the same things. I love it when people are like, I was talking to Russell Brand. I did the Russell Brand podcast recently, and he brought up, he's like, you've talked quite a bit about civil war in the past. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And I was like, there's a lot of things you need to understand about that. For one, I was right. Okay. And we just had a shootout last weekend and the weekend before that. And you might say, oh, but those are just shootouts. When did we have shootouts 5 years ago? It wasn't happening. But let's break this down. I was like, we had numerous articles from The Atlantic and all these other smart people about the possibility of a civil war escalating in the United States, especially with Donald Trump getting elected. You then had a Princeton professor saying, I think this was in 2016, we are in a cold civil war. This was a long time ago. And that sentiment emerges. And then we see the battle for Berkeley, the base stick man, old women getting explosives thrown at them. I was watching this stuff happen on the ground in San Jose and Berkeley at these Trump rallies. And then I was like, people have lost their minds. You don't see a de-escalation when people want to tit for tat. So I was like, I think we're going to see a civil war.
And it's not always like when you saw those people assault Larry Elder, those are obviously like LA crackheads that are just radical crackheads just roaming the streets, probably don't even live anywhere.
Yeah, but they have access to political information. They're being indoctrinated.
Yes. What I was saying is at that Berkeley one, I think you were there and I was there at the same time. I noticed an older crowd who looked normal. They looked like they could have been teachers.
Waving little Trump flags.
No, not that. They were picking up rocks. They were on the Antifa side. They were picking up rocks and throwing them at Trump supporters. And I saw them there, and I was undercover because I wanted to, capture what was going on. And I told them, like, hey, guys, I'm like, you might want to get out of here. This is, like, nasty, because they would just look like regular people that just probably walked down the wrong street and was recording it. And then I looked back at the tape, and they were picking up rocks and throwing it at the Trump supporters.
So
I was surprised.
Where did we end up, right? To have people come to me and I love these bread tubers and leftists being like, haha, Tim Pool thinks civil war. And I'm like, well, since those predictions, which I've continued to make, we had January 6th, where about 1,000 people stormed into the Capitol building. Well, I should say a large number of them stormed to the front gates.
And were
escorted in. A lot of people were escorted in by cops opening the door, but they did disrupt the Electoral College vote count. Now, a lot of Trump supporters think that it was effectively a setup in that police were standing down, that Pelosi didn't get, National Guard in there. Regardless, people fought with cops to get into the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. They had no real plan. That's what the FBI report says, but they did shut down the Electoral College vote. I'm not here to overplay this and call it an insurrection. I'm saying, that's unprecedented. And what did we see around the same time? We had, I think it was 48 states involved in a lawsuit over how the election was handled. And I'm sitting here like, I've been telling you, people shooting each other in the streets, a dude being killed, then Trump having feds hunt down the guy who did it and kill him. Like, yo, we are dangerously close to this stuff falling apart. Yeah. John Podesta, as reported by the Boston Globe, said that if Trump wins in 2020, the West Coast should secede from the Union. A new YouGov poll, data showing that in the United States, 5 different regions, 37.2% of the American population wants their region to secede from the Union. A lawsuit between 48 states contesting the election. And to this day, 80 million, or I think it's like 2/3 of Republicans distrusting the election results. Yeah. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.